The director of 202 Strategies and its polling services is Stephan Miller, and he is with us live via telephone from Israel. Welcome to JM in the AM.
Good morning, Nachum. How are you and your listeners?
Everyone's doing great, and I think the voters in Israel, based on your research, are doing a little more undecided than we thought. There are people who have come onto these airwaves in the last couple of weeks and have touted the fact that Israelis generally are somewhere over 80% decided. Some might even say 90% decided about the January 22nd election. In the poll that you're very familiar with, your team and you led the effort to get these numbers, and according to the Times of Israel, where I'm reading from right now, 31% of likely voters are still undecided. And now I don't know if you as a mathematician and polling genius are allowed to analyze a statistic like this for us, but we're curious. Why is it so high?
Well, let me start by saying, as a pollster and strategist, I was disappointed in myself at how surprised I was at this number. Because here in Israel, you talk to friends, you talk to people, because, first of all, there are so many new faces on the political map, and also because of the large amount of parties in the center and the left. It shouldn't be surprising that so many voters actually say that they are yet to decide who they'll vote for. I would note that what makes this poll so special, now released on timesofisrael.com, is that we, instead of polling eligible voters, which there are over 1 million eligible voters that don't vote, we asked our survey respondents how likely they were to vote, and we only surveyed those who were very likely or somewhat likely to vote. So this is the most accurate sample yet to be released. We also included cell phones and a few Arabic language surveys to really get the most accurate sample. And I am disappointed that I was surprised at the final result, which was indeed 31% of likely voters are yet to make up their mind. And we're now really just 2 weeks away from Election Day. And it's a high number. It's something that should shake up some of the campaigns today as they read it, as they reevaluate how they're spending their resources of time and money and advertising, that they need to question their support with so many voters indeed undecided.
Stephan Miller is with us. He actually wrote the article that touts the 31% at the Times of Israel website. He is the author of the article from the political consultant firm of 202 Strategies. Fieldwork conducted by Tri-Strategic Research between the 25th of December and January the 2nd. So this statistic, you just alluded to it, is, we always look, and we of course look from afar. You're very close, but we look from afar and always view Israeli elections and the couple of weeks before as pretty crazy, as a whirlwind, as out of control. With this number of only 69% of likely voters having already decided who they're voting for, I would think it's only going to be crazier and crazier over the next couple of weeks.
Indeed, and really what we found is that of that 31% of undecided voters, that they tend to be in large part centrist, self-described center voters and center-left voters. So this is really a battle that while there are many undecided voters on the right, the way that they split is not necessarily going to define the ideological makeup of the next government. So when sort of center-right and right voters decide between Prime Minister Netanyahu's Likud Beitenu party or, in large part, Naftali Bennett's Jewish Home Party, that will not decide the ideological makeup of the government. But indeed, those center voters, where the Prime Minister's Likud Beitenu party is fighting with Labor, led by Sheli Yachimovich, or Yesh Atid, led by Yair Lapid, indeed, the way that those undecided voters move can define the ideological makeup of the next government, and whether certainly the number of parties that will need to be brought in by the Prime Minister to make the coalition, or indeed strengthen the left and the center, so that there could be some very interesting coalition outcome.
Stephen Miller with us live from Israel. Wouldn't you agree, and I see that your system essentially divides up in some type of proportional scientific method the undecided votes to get to the numbers that we're going to discuss in a moment, which are the specific numbers for each party. But wouldn't you agree that often in Israel something severe, and I don't mean severe, God forbid, always, very bad, it could be severe in any direction, often occurs in the last couple of weeks that really could give this undecided group a much more weighted response to the right or to the left?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, we're going to be, this week, the television campaigns of the parties are going up on air. They're going to be aggressively pursuing their different messages. And of course, let's not forget that Prime Minister Netanyahu's Likud Beitenu party, currently controlling the government, has all the tools of being in power, being in government, to apply government to help make news and sway the narratives and the messages of the next 2 weeks in their favor. So I would not be surprised if we see some very surprising statements, possibly some actions by the government, new proposals and plans by different parties, really fighting for attention over the last 2 weeks of those undecided voters to sway them to their party, potentially return home voters that are disappointed in where they voted last time but want to come home, or voters that are looking for a new party. So I think you're right. These next 2 weeks are going to be very intense, and it is indeed likely that we're going to see some major announcements, some possible actions by the government that will shake up the news cycle to further bring the narratives and the messages of the day-to-day news here in Israel towards one political party or another.
We are the first to speak to Stephen Miller after the publishing the article this morning, or actually just moments ago. For us, it's the morning, on the timesofisrael.com. You could see it. Timesofisrael.com has it as their headline. It's the latest poll in Israel. All right, couple of questions. Based on your research, will Kadima have any seats in the next government?
This is very, and I'm smiling because you're asking me that. It is, in essence, a dead party. Kadima has died. Remember, Kadima was in large part a party built upon the personality of the heroic figure Ariel Sharon. It then waned under the leadership of Ehud Olmert and Tzipi Livni, and now under the current leadership of Shaul Mofaz. Indeed, it is dead. We looked at those voters, and they really have left the party. In fact, I'll give you a crazy statistic that I included in the article, that our survey had a very large sample of 803 respondents. That's a larger sample than is normally done by publicly available polling. We did it because it's statistically more correct. And of those 803 phone calls, only 3 people, less than 0.5%, only 3 people said that they would be voting for Kadima. So, Kadima has really disappeared as Ariel Sharon and indeed Olmert had disappeared from the political map. And those voters, because the party has disappeared, are really a large block of the undecided voters. They are looking where to go. They do lean towards the Labor Party, Yesh Atid, Hatnuah, typically this new party as sort of the center-left voters. But Likud Beitenu does fight for some of those voters, and would be it would be wise of them, of course, in the next 2 weeks to try to gain some of those voters. They are center-left voters, but they are looking at new parties. They are not looking at Kadima, and indeed we might see that this is the last election in the state of Israel where Kadima will be one of the competing parties.
Wow, unbelievable. Timesofisrael.com has the article that we're referring to, written by Stephen Miller, his firm responsible for the polling data that was just released minutes ago. Now, you have the number of seats for Naftali Bennett, who's going to be a guest of ours tomorrow here at JM and AM at 15. I'm sure you're aware of the fact that certain polling agencies had him close to 20 seats last week.
Mm-hmm. Naftali Bennett is certainly one of the most exciting figures of this election. He, 6 months ago, really was not on the political map, and through what appears to be very hard work and a lot of aggressive work in the media, he has raised his name recognition and has become what our poll suggests, he will be the leader of the third largest party in the next Knesset, and depending on the coalition, he might be the leader of the second largest party in the coalition.
Right, but my point is, if you have him at 15 and others have him between 18 and 20, should we believe you or them?
Well, the public polling out there has certainly put a range of seats for him. We have him at a very strong and stable 15. I'm going to tell you why it's strong and stable, because most of the undecideds indeed are in the center and center left. So he is a smaller sort of market share of voters to be fighting for, and his appeal is broad in the sense that he appeals to a wide spectrum of voters as far as their political outlook and their sort of religious observance. So he is a strong 15, and he certainly has room to grow. And I'll tell you exactly why he has room to grow. It's because still a very large percentage of the voters have never heard of him.
Right.
1 out of 3 likely voters have never heard of him or don't offer an opinion of him. But what our survey shows is that if someone hears about them, they are more likely to support him and like him than they are to dislike him. So his job the next 2 weeks is just continue to do what he's doing and getting his message out, because as more people hear about him, they like him. And that's a great trait to have as a politician in the last 2 weeks of the campaign.
No question about that. All right. So you have Tzipi Livni's party at 6. Another surprising number to some of us is the Labor Party at 21, because it was only a few weeks ago that they had much less, correct?
Yeah, what we found in our poll really was, if I can say so, the collapse of Hatnuah, Tzipi Livni's party.
Right.
And those voters really going, it appears, to be moving towards the Labor. So the strengthening of Labor at the expense of Tzipi Livni's Hatnuah party, and that's what we're seeing. And in the next 2 weeks, as the center and center-left undecided voters are looking where to go, there's sort of, I would expect to see a bandwagon effect where with the growth of Shelley Yachimovich, with her and the Labor Party, that we'll see her rise at the expense of some of the other center and center-left parties. And we're already seeing that with the collapse of Tzipi Livni's party.
And finally, obviously, Likud and Beitenu, which you have at 34 seats. This has been also a fluctuating number over the last few weeks, because I think that they were close to 40 and at some point even closer than 34 to 30. Do you think that this is where we're going to end up, or it's hard to tell what could happen over the next 2 weeks?
It's hard to tell, and let me give you sort of two views. One is that the 34 mandates is a strong number, and it's a stable number, although when we look at the undecideds, again, they tilt center and center-left. So there's two options. If the Likud Beitenu campaign is pursuing messaging and a campaign strategy that veers right, then those center and center-left undecided voters might indeed flip away, and while they might gain 1 or 2 on the right, they're likely to lose more on their center and center-left support. The other option is that they do put up a fight in the center, that voters in the last 2 weeks really see this as a choice between Prime Minister Netanyahu or a different Prime Minister, and certainly we could see a surge and a return of strength to the Likud Beitenu party. So it could go either way, depending on sort of which direction, left or right, the party heads. But I think they really need to fight in the center, and they can strengthen their support. Stephen
Miller with us from Israel. When you analyze the numbers in terms of where the different parties are going to end up as of today, again, we have obviously a couple of weeks left until the real election. When you analyze the numbers, do you also ask what issues are most important to people?
We do, and I appreciate you bringing that up. The first articles are up today, but this is every day this week we're going to be releasing more and more data from this poll on timesofisrael.com. We have deep analysis of the issues facing this country, from economic issues to Iran and everything in between, and we found some very surprising data points. We can't just release them yet, but I would invite your listeners around the world to be sure to check out timesofisrael.com in the coming days as we release more and more data. I promise you will be surprised and delighted by the findings.
And you'll be writing those articles?
Yes, we've released the data and are putting together the analysis for Times of Israel. I'll be writing those, and I'm happy to update you and your listeners as we release them.
You know, it's funny because you just mentioned, obviously, what I would think would be the two most important issues, Iran and the economy. Are there other issues?
There are absolutely other issues: relations with the Palestinians, education, instability in the region, enlistment and integration of the ultra-Orthodox in the workforce. There are a series of issues, and I promise you, you will be surprised when you find out what the number one issue is in the state of Israel, facing voters in the next government.
Yeah, my comment, what I was alluding to was I didn't think any of those in terms of numbers compared with the first two. But you're saying we'll be surprised when we find out what number one is, huh?
Keep posted to timesofisrael.com, and I promise you, you will be surprised.
Interesting. Very interesting. How does a young man who's from the United States become such an influential pollster in the state of Israel?
Well, first you make Aliyah, Nachum, and I'm a very proud citizen of the state of Israel, and that's the first step to any success here living in Israel. And lots of hard work and opportunity is everywhere here in Israel. You just have to look for it.
Is there something you could tell us, especially those who watched the election here in the United States so closely and basically saw that some of the pollsters, really hit the nail on the head? Some people built their reputation on it and were able to maintain that reputation through the election. Could you give us one big difference about polling there as opposed to polling here? A lot of people like to point out how they believe that in Israel, unlike the U.S., people will lie during polling data, but they will tell the truth at the polls, so to speak, and give their real feelings when they actually go in with their secret ballot. Do you think that's true?
Well, you brought up a great point, and that's the difference, sort of the standards and the levels in the United States and internationally compared to here in Israel. And unfortunately, having sort of learned and studied under the American system, the levels here aren't as high, and we tried to correct that. The two most important points: one is that our survey of respondents, our poll, was of likely voters. Okay, there's a very different group of people who are likely to vote than there are just 18-year-old and up Israelis.
Right.
There are adults
right.
that are eligible, and there are people that are likely to vote. And so we believe this is more accurate because it's likely voter. The other reason we believe this is more accurate, and this is something that was found to be absolutely true in the 2012 presidential campaigns in the U.S., you have to call people on their cell phones. Israelis, sometimes Israelis have 2 or 3 cell phones. You have to call Israelis on their cell phones. And we included at least 10% cell phone only sample in our survey to help reach that audience that is they vote, but they do not have landlines at home. And so we believe that this is a more accurate survey because of those 2 points.
Unbelievable. Never would have thought of that. All right, Stephen Miller's writing all week, Times.